This last February, the U.S. Department of Labor issued new findings on an ongoing investigation of Packer Sanitation Services Incorporated. The company was found to have been illegally employing over 100 children in hazardous jobs at 13 meat packing facilities owned by JBS, Cargill, Tyson, and others. These children, aged 13 to 17, worked illegally on overnight shifts cleaning razor-sharp saws and other high-risk equipment on the slaughterhouse kill floors. At least 3 of them suffered injuries, including burns from caustic cleaning chemicals, and as a result, the Department of Homeland Security has announced a parallel investigation into whether these child workers were connected to illegal employment by traffickers who profited from their labor. This story highlights the recent rise in child labor law violations. According to the Department of Labor, the number of minors employed in violation of child labor laws in fiscal year 2022 increased 283% over fiscal year 2015, a 7-year period. These trends and numbers should be concerning for the U.S. and anyone that values the safety of children, and yet we are seeing the exact opposite happening. Legislation in over 10 states has been introduced and passed at the state levels to roll back child labor protections. Apparently, many of these legislatures find it okay to put children to work in dangerous and loosely regulated work conditions. In research for this video, I found that the Nebraska legislature has introduced a bill to allow employers to offer children a substandard minimum wage, which is particularly exploitative. If you can't afford to pay a normal employee to do the job in a profitable manner, maybe the company shouldn't be in business. Why is it okay to discriminate against an employee based on a juvenile age basis? Companies should be required to pay the same wage to all employees if they are doing the same roles. While I don't want to dive deep into the politics of these child labor laws because this channel is here to focus on the economics, I do want to say that I think these laws are particularly reprehensible. It is our job to protect children and make sure that they have the best opportunities to succeed in their future. These laws that loosen requirements feel like they are there to let companies and possible parental guardians exploit and take advantage of children that will set them up at a major economic disadvantage for the rest of their lives. A lot of these laws will have an oversized impact on development of children of minority and marginalized groups that are already steeped in a disadvantaged environment. Especially when many of these children don't know any better and they are easy to exploit for these companies' purposes. There's nothing more disgusting than skirting safety issues or cutting costs by putting the lives of children at risk for the sake of profit. For the rest of this video, I'm going to talk about why these rollbacks are happening on child labor law protections, what that means for children, and specifically focusing on the harm that it can do to them developmentally and economically in their futures. The Economic Policy Institute notes that the labor participation rates among 16 to 24-year-olds has shifted over the last 20 years, dropping roughly 10%. The EPI's report notes that some industry lobbyists that have been backing the recent changes in child labor laws have called the 56% labor participation rate as, quote, awfully low. Now, it's no surprise that these industries rely on minimum wage labor or cheap labor to serve as the backbone in carrying out many tasks that make these companies profit. Now, referring to a 56% labor participation rate among young people as low ignores many factors that we need to consider. Things like macroeconomic trends, demographic shifts in the workforce, and rational choices about working as opposed to attending school or engaging in developmental activities is better for these young individuals. This is the question that we really need to be asking ourselves in the trade-off between participating in the labor market or making long-run investments in education and training. Now, don't get me wrong, I myself as a teenager worked many different jobs and found a lot of value in kind of developing that work ethic at different companies. But it does need to be said that, it's a balancing act. We need to make sure that these kids are learning and have time to develop and do other things in their lives other than just working for a low wage for these companies. So getting back to why these rollbacks have been happening in the last couple of years, well, we've seen in a sort of post-COVID world that the labor markets have tightened significantly. Unemployment has continued to remain low despite a lot of other warning signs that we've seen in the economy that their cracks are showing. As of April 2023, it's currently sitting at 3.4%, the latest measurement I had at the time of the making of this video. So with the labor markets being tight, where are these companies turning to? Well, child labor, I guess. We are seeing more laws being introduced to weaken the requirements around these child labor laws and their protections, and many of these laws, unsurprisingly, are being backed and supported by industry groups that would stand to benefit from an influx of new labor into the market. Now, these different rollbacks and bills have sort of different components to them based on the state that we're looking at, but essentially they let child labor work longer hours, work different start or end times, reduce regulations on hazardous work that a child could do, and offer substandard wages to minors. I don't know about you, but to me, none of those things really sound particularly great for a child labor worker, maybe working longer hours depending on the state and how much they could work before, but letting them work later into the night or letting them work more hazardous jobs or paying them less are not good things, in my opinion. If you find this video as killer as a child employed slaughterhouse, then please give the video a like and consider subscribing to the channel if you'd like to see more content in the future. It does help my videos get more visibility on YouTube. I want to shift gears and now talk about the harm that can be done to children if they are focused more on work as a youth as opposed to spending more time on development and education. So first, looking at sort of the developmental side, there's a lot of research done here by psychologists and social scientists on sort of looking at how youth are affected by working longer hours. And a lot of them point to troubling signs in development. One study looked at when youth begin working more than 20 hours per week have shown increases in substance use, increases in delinquency compared to youth who remain unemployed and devoted to schoolwork. And I think really sort of the children deserve the right to be children. They should be able to learn through play. They should be able to socialize with their peers. We need to consider the exposure we put children to when they're in the workplace. What if they're physically damaged? How does that affect their long-term ability to work for the rest of their life? Forget their work life. What about just general quality of life they will have if they sort of suffer some catastrophic injury in these places that are poorly regulated? Also, keep in mind, children are not fully developed mentally and physically, so they could be more accident prone than an older worker that is able to kind of reason through and think things through when operating machinery or other situations that could be potentially hazardous or dangerous to the worker. And lastly, we need to consider the effects of sort of the physical strain and work that a child worker will suffer that a worker that does not enter the workforce until later might. So the average US worker participates in the workforce for about 42 years, from the ages of 22 to 64. Why should we be asking kids to start working at a younger age? This could hurt them, it could set them back, and it could sort of shorten their working career, their ability to work, and leave them in a worse economic position. So shifting to the harm done to them economically, children who work more hours a week are shown to have declines in school performance, and there's study after study showing the amount of education that a worker receives has a major impact on the amount of money they will earn over their working lifetime. Comparing a high school degree versus a bachelor's, we see that the typical earnings for a bachelor's degree are 84% higher. The worker with the bachelor's degree will earn over $1.2 million more in the lifetime of their working career. Poverty rates are lower for people with bachelor's degrees, approximately 3.5 times lower. Unemployment rates are lower for workers with college degrees. And lastly, they are 47% more likely to have health insurance through their employers. So when we put these child laborers to work, this results in them spending less time on their education. Some children may shirk school altogether, entering the workforce at a full time at a younger age, and as a result, suffer over the lifetime of their working careers. So the data is clear. We should be encouraging children to develop more and let them acquire further skills. Time spent in the workplace at a young age can be detrimental to their lifetime economic prosperity. And again, I'm not an opponent to work for minors. I was employed throughout high school and college, and I found my work to be rewarding and contributed to my development as a person, but I did not let it get in the way of my schoolwork. And I think we need to make sure that protections are in place for these younger workers. There's a reason we put in child labor laws over 100 years ago, to protect these children from terrible work conditions that would set them back for life. Reversing these laws now is a classic example of seeking short-term profits and ignoring long-term repercussions of those decisions and the impact they will have on our country's workforce going into the future. It's particularly damaging when we allow these places to exploit minors that don't know any better, may not be able to advocate for themselves against the adults that are employing them and managing them. So let me know in the comments if you agree or have a different take, or if you were a worker as a teenager and did that help or hurt you in your future performance. If you'd like to see more content from me, consider checking out the video on the screen now. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.